Okay, Mr. McGill. So, as we've previously discussed,
Yes.
we are going to be talking about the plea deal that the ADA is preparing to offer you. So, I know that you were preferring not to have to go any jail time.
No, yeah.
So, what is your position? Could you just tell me a little bit about like why you think that it was just self-defense?
Well, I was woken up in the middle of the night by my dogs barking and my alarm going off. I have my family and my elderly father and my girlfriend in my house. So and I didn't know what was out there. I know that like I said, there was something enough to rile up the dogs, and trigger the alarm system. So I wanted to make sure that we were all safe. So as I've told you before, I got the gun to make sure because, again, I didn't know it was out there. I didn't know who it was, what they had on them. And I was just essentially defending my property and my family and myself from what had been, who intruded into my shed.
Okay, so you had mentioned before that you were afraid that the judge might not understand your self-defense position. Is that still true?
Yes, I'm afraid that they won't understand my self-defense position.
I would somewhat agree with that. That's why my personal recommendation is to go to trial and to go to a jury trial. So I'll explain a little bit what our plea deal is here. So the ADA has offered you in exchange for a guilty plea to second-degree murder, which is kind of like an unintentional murder. You understand what that means, right?
Yes. But still murder, correct?
Yes, still murder.
And that's a felony?
Yes, it's a felony. And he has offered you a 10-year sentence.
In prison?
In prison.
Okay.
Yes, unfortunately. But basically, that's generous in terms of how if we were to go to trial and they were to find you guilty, you could face much longer jail time, anywhere from like a minimum of 15 years upwards of 40 years in prison, were trial to be unsuccessful. But don't worry, you've got me on your side, absolutely. And I'm doing the best I can in order to make sure that the truth gets out there. So you said that the alleged victim was charging you, right?
Yes.
And we have reason to believe from the police report that that was an unintentional, or that was a drug-induced mania, essentially. So the pros to the plea deal is that a 10-year sentence, obviously shorter than what you could face were you to be found guilty in a court of law. Yes. But the con to the plea is that, honestly, I truly believe you could get a lower sentence were we to take this to trial. I think the plea is a little bit too harsh. I say we could plead something at minimum self-defense because that's what you think.
I believe happened. Yeah, I was defending myself.
I think, but if we are unsuccessful on that count, then we could bring a charge of involuntary manslaughter.
Okay. Now, what does that entail? What's involuntary manslaughter?
Essentially, that means that someone is dead. There's been some sort of harm or homicide, but it is not as stringent as murder. It's not as strict. The punishment is less because there's kind of a lack of a criminal intent to commit that murder. And so
Which is accurate.
You didn't mean to cause this man's death. You were frightened and meant to protect yourself.
Absolutely.
But the issue with that is that we don't really have a lot of proof or evidence that you were in direct harm. So it's more so we have to rely on you thinking it was self-defense, which is a little bit of a harder defense to go on since there was no, in the police report, there's no evidence of a weapon that the victim had. So my recommendation would be to go to trial and let a jury decide, because I believe that a jury would be favorable to your position, that you feared for your family's life and that someone in a drug-induced mania is on your property. You have a right to stay and defend your property. It's something called the Castle Doctrine, where you're allowed to defend your property, your home, if someone is on it, or your property. The state of Texas, for example, has the stand your ground law. So if someone's on your property, you have the right to make them get off.
Yeah.
So that could also be a possible direction for us to go in. So do you have any questions right now?
How long would a trial take?
That is another con I have to make for you, because trial would go on for a while. We're looking at several months.
Okay. But that's better than 10 years in prison.
10 years in prison,
guaranteed.
exactly, Mr. McGill. You are exactly right.
Yeah.
So do you have any more questions
I think that's
before
it.
we proceed?
I think that's it.
And do you agree? Would you like to go to trial?
I agree. I would like to go to trial. I don't want to be in prison for sure for 10 years.
All right. Well, then that's
Cool.
what we'll do.